the two enumerations, because in reality, devotion, development, and purification make up the content of stewardship itself. And if we go back down from this higher constellation to the lower constellation, we see that the role of the steward in the earth is to ensure that these 5 principal aims and purposes of sacred law, the protection of freedom of conscience, life, intellect, human dignity, and property, inhere in every action that the believer engages in. This is the stewardship. This is the responsibility of the steward in the earth that every responsible adult has been made to be. It's not the Muslim that is the steward, right? The Khalifa, right? What did Allah say? إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I am going to place a Khalifa in the earth. And who was that? That was man. But that also includes women, doesn't it? Right? Who said the sisters can't be Khalifas? Right? In this modality, you have the Imam al-A'zam, right? You have the secular authority in the world. And if he rules according to sacred law, he is the Khalifa, but the technical term for that Khalifa is Imam, al-Imam al-A'zam, the great Imam. Right? But there is another modality of Khilafah, and that is the responsibility of every human being, not just man, and not just the woman, right? And not just the Muslim. But every human being has been made responsible by his Creator to ensure that these higher order purposes inhere in our existence. Inhere in our relationships with the world around us, in our relationships with one another, in our relationship with the environment. Now, I wanted to give an example of the application of this model that we've illustrated with regard to the environment. How do we apply this model of 2 constellations of higher order principles to our relationship with the environment? Well, first, didn't we have a purpose that was a purpose of devotion, right? How does that apply to our relationship with the environment? It applies or manifests itself in our relationship to the environment through gratefulness, shukr. Isn't shukr or gratefulness or thanksgiving to God, isn't that an act of devotion? And when we see that we draw so much from the environment, that we benefit so much from the environment, that from it we gain our sustenance and our nourishment, right? That from it we gain natural resources that we put to the service of the betterment of humanity, that we appreciate that. That we appreciate and show thanksgiving that comes from God alone. And what is the technical definition of thanksgiving in sacred law? Does anyone know? Right? I know everyone is just too shy to say. Right? And on the tip of your tongue is صَرْفُ الْعَبْدِ جَمِيعَ مَا أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. Right? A slave's or a person's employing all of that which God has given him for the purpose for which it was created. Right? This shukr is the manifestation of the aim and purpose of devotion in the environment. And what about that aim and purpose of purification, of self-purification? How does it manifest itself in our relationship with the environment? It manifests itself through dhikr, the remembrance of God, the invocation of God. When our eye beholds the beauty of creation, we are reminded that Allah is Jameel wa yuhibbul Jamal. Right? We are reminded of the beauty of God. When we see the fruit on a fruit-bearing tree, we're reminded that God is the sustainer, and it's as if we see God in the reflected in the creation. And it is a constant state of dhikr for the one who has a heart and is attentive, paying attention, right? And is a witness, right? Is a witness. God says in the Quran, أَلَا تَرَى إِلَى رَبِّكَ كَيْفَ مَدَّ الظِّلِّ. Do you not see your Lord, as He extends the shadows? Right? Think of a tree and the shadow, right, that it casts. And as the sun moves, the shadow moves, and God asks you, do you not see your Lord? Excuse me. Do you not see your Lord as He extends the shadow? And notice He doesn't say, do you not see the shadow as your Lord extends it? What is the first thing that comes to the mind of the conscious heart? Allah. He sees Allah before he sees the shadow. Like a person who would walk into his empty house after having been gone for the day, and everything is as it was. Right? He unlocks the door, he comes in, he puts the paper down, and he takes his shoes off, right? And he hangs up his coat, and he walks through the house, and he does this and that, and then he goes upstairs, and he walks into the bedroom, and everything is normal, and then he sees a dagger stuck in his pillow. Right? What does he say? Right? Does he say, wow, that's a dagger stuck in my pillow? Or does he say, someone was here? He sees the someone, he sees the intruder first. And Allah draws your attention to the movement of the shadow. Do you not see the mover of the shadow? Right? As He moves that shadow. And that's how the natural world becomes a source of remembrance, of dhikr, of invocation of Allah. Now, moving to the third principle of the application of this model to the environment, we all know from the Quran that the natural world was created and placed in the service of man, to be subjugated to the needs of man. And who is man? He is the steward of himself, of his family, and of his environment. And so he manages these resources. He manages these resources, and as a steward of these resources, his job is to ensure that they are employed for what? For the 5 aims and purposes of sacred law. For the preservation of freedom of conscience, for the preservation of life, of human life, for the preservation of intellect, for the preservation of human dignity. And do we not employ our natural resources to ensure the enhancement of the quality of life of the people of this world? Is that not the responsibility of the believing Muslim? Right? We'll come back to that. Right? The preservation of property. Now, we realize also that there is a potential for abuse of the environment. We are painfully reminded of this every day. Right? It's not just that some places are getting warmer. Certainly since I got here, the UK, it's not getting any warmer. Right? But I'll tell you one thing, Abu Dhabi, where I live, is getting colder. The winters are getting longer. And they're getting colder even since I first came 5 years ago. Okay? This is odd indeed. So we are painfully conscious of the potential for abuse of the environment in our stewardship, in our management of natural resources, but the controls, the regulatory controls of this is the fact that we also see in them thanksgiving, gratefulness, and remembrance. They control the potential for abuse. But it's when in our management of our natural resources we lose the regulatory principles of dhikr and shukr, of remembrance and gratefulness, it's when they are lost from the equation that the abuse inheres in the environments. This is the calling, this is the vocation. Do you all need that other microphone, or are we fine? We're fine, she said. Now, this is the vocation, this is the calling of the believer. This is the mission of the believer in the world, but Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayya, right, a very noted scholar of our age, and a very insightful scholar of how our traditional principles might apply to a modern context, if anyone has read his books, right? He was Chief Justice of Mauritania, also Minister of Education, and now he's a member of the Fiqh Council in Jeddah and a professor at the university there. He has identified 3 challenges, 3 crises that beset this community and would then hamper their ability to rise up to fulfill this mission. And those 3 crises that he has identified, right, are a shrinking of philosophical ability amongst the Muslims.